The funny thing about calling the cops on someone for providing free CPR training is that you look like a world-class grade A jerk when they actually show up. Officer Miller had that look on his face. It was a special kind of tired, the sort of bone-deep weariness reserved for professionals who are frequently summoned to deal with problems that could have been solved by a simple, grown-up conversation. He scanned the scene. The annual Willow Creek Estates summer block party, a sea of pastel polo shirts and anxious smiles. His eyes landed on my pride and joy, the freshly wrapped Ford E350 that used to be an ambulance, parked majestically beside the hot dog stand. Then he looked at the CPR dummy lying on my table, its plastic chest forever ready for compressions. He looked at me, a guy in a plain gray t-shirt and jeans. Finally, his gaze settled on the source of the 911 call. Brenda. She stood with her hands on her hips, her face a blotchy, furious red that clashed violently with her lavender sun visor. Her clipboard, the wooden scepter of her authority as HOA president, was clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "That's him, officer!" she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's impersonating a paramedic. That vehicle is a menace. He's disrupting a sanctioned community event." Officer Miller let out a sigh so profound it seemed to stir the humid August air. "Evening, sir," he said to me, completely ignoring Brenda for a moment. "We got a call about all this. What's going on here?" I offered a calm, friendly smile. "Good evening, officer. I'm Alex. This is my privately owned vehicle. I was just demonstrating how to use a defibrillator for my neighbors. You know, community safety and all that." I gestured to the small crowd of residents who had gathered, their initial fear of the police cruiser now morphing into a kind of supportive curiosity. They were my audience, my witnesses, my jury. And it all started 4 weeks ago, with the mundane tyranny of a Zoom call and the near disaster of some poorly timed indigestion. To understand why a 32-year-old systems analyst would buy a decommissioned ambulance and park it in the driveway of his beige suburban home, you have to understand the ecosystem of Willow Creek Estates. Our neighborhood wasn't just a place, it was a brand. Every lawn was a manicured carpet of identical fescue. Every mailbox was the same shade of black, approved by the architectural committee. Every decision, from the color of your front door to the type of seasonal wreath you could hang upon it, was governed by a 3-inch thick binder of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, the CC and Rs. And the high priestess, the supreme interpreter of this sacred text, was Brenda. Our story begins, as so many suburban horror stories do, at an HOA meeting. I was there in spirit, which is to say my laptop was logged into the Zoom call while I was busy defending a control point in some online shooter. My camera was off, my mic was muted. It was the perfect way to fulfill my civic duty while still doing something productive. I'd tune in whenever I heard Brenda's voice rise in pitch, which was her tell that a new crusade was afoot. "And I want to bring to the board's attention a flagrant violation at 114 Tulip Lane," she announced, her voice dripping with prosecutorial zeal. "The Hendersons have installed a garden gnome." A murmur went through the dozen or so faces on the screen. "Now, as you know," Brenda continued, "the CC and Rs, Section 12, Paragraph 7, Subsection B, clearly states that lawn accoutrements shall not exceed a height of 18 inches. I personally measured the gnome in question this morning. It is, from the tip of its boots to the peak of its ridiculously pointy red hat, 19.5 inches tall." I paused my game. She measured a gnome with a tape measure. The sheer, unadulterated pettiness was a work of art. My mind raced with questions. Did she sneak onto their lawn under the cover of darkness? Does she have a specialized anti-gnome task force? Is there a PowerPoint presentation detailing this infraction? That's when the AED came up. Some poor soul, a new resident who didn't yet know not to ask genuine questions, piped up. "Brenda, I just had a quick question about the community AED by the pool. The little sticker on it says the battery needs to be checked every month. Has that been done recently?" There was a tight, unpleasant silence. "I have personally handled the AED situation," Brenda said, her voice turning hard and defensive. "It was becoming an eyesore. It's been moved to a more appropriate location to bring it in line with our community aesthetic standards." "Oh," the resident said. "Where is it now?" "It's being securely stored," Brenda clipped, then immediately changed the subject. "Now back to the gnome." I logged off, securely stored. The phrase hung in my mind, ominous and bureaucratic. But I had a digital fortress to capture, so I put it out of my head. It was a mistake that would become glaringly obvious the following Saturday. It was one of those oppressive August afternoons where the air feels like a hot, wet towel. I was on my front porch, locked in a mortal struggle with a piece of IKEA furniture that called itself a lack coffee table, but was proving to be a lack of all sanity device. The inscrutable hieroglyphics of the instruction manual had me sweating more than the humidity. That's when I saw Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson from 112 Tulip Lane, the owner of the offending gnome, was a neighborhood institution. He was a widower in his late 70s, a kind man who always had a wave for you, and grew the most amazing tomatoes, which he'd leave in little baskets on people's doorsteps. He was out mowing his lawn, a Sisyphean task in the summer heat. I saw him stop the mower. He leaned on the handle, breathing heavily. Then he stumbled. He clutched his chest, his face contorted in pain, and he slowly crumpled onto his perfectly manicured lawn. The universe went into slow motion. My half-assembled Swedish coffee table suddenly seemed profoundly unimportant. "Oh my God!" The scream came from Sarah, a young mom from across the street. She was already on her phone, presumably with 911. I didn't think, I just ran. Another neighbor, a guy named Dave, was right behind me. "Get the AED!" someone yelled. Dave and I didn't break stride. We veered toward the community pool, our feet pounding on the hot pavement. The clear, weatherproof box where the defibrillator was supposed to be was just ahead. We got there, hearts hammering in our chests, and I ripped open the door. It was empty. Well, not entirely empty. Taped to the back of the box was a small, laminated card, perfectly centered. It looked like a business card for a Bond villain. With trembling hands, I tore it from the wall. I read it out loud, my voice cracking with disbelief. For safety and aesthetic reasons, the community automated external defibrillator has been relocated to the HOA document storage closet in the clubhouse basement. Access is available by appointment only, mon-free, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Please submit a community asset request form 48 hours in advance. We just stood there, speechless. Dave looked at me, his face pale. I looked at the note. Mr. Henderson could be dying 50 yards away, and the one piece of equipment that could save his life was locked in a basement, guarded by more red tape than a nuclear silo. Brenda hadn't just moved it. She had weaponized bureaucracy against a potential medical emergency. The distant wail of a siren cut through the stunned silence. By the time we ran back to Mr. Henderson's lawn, the paramedics were already there. They were professionals, calm and efficient, a stark contrast to our frantic helplessness. Mr. Henderson was conscious, sitting up. He was embarrassed. "Just a bit of heartburn," he told the paramedic, his voice weak. "And I think I forgot to drink any water today." Severe acid reflux and dehydration. Not a heart attack. The wave of relief that washed over me was so intense it made my knees weak, but as the ambulance pulled away, After giving Mr. Henderson a clean bill of health and a bottle of water, the relief was quickly replaced by a cold, simmering rage. We, the neighbors, stood there in a little cluster of shared trauma. We had failed. The system that was supposed to protect us, the simple act of having a life-saving device ready, had been dismantled in the name of aesthetics. I looked at the useless empty box by the pool, and then down the street to Brenda's house, with its perfectly pruned rose bushes and its complete absence of oversized gnomes. The gears in my head, the ones that usually spent their time optimizing server load and debugging code, started to turn with a new, glorious purpose. The problem wasn't the missing AED. The problem was accessibility and control. Brenda wanted to control access. She wanted everything to be neat, tidy, and subject to her approval. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the kind of smile that precedes a terrible, wonderful, and expensive idea. You want to make life-saving equipment inaccessible because it's an eyesore? I thought. The plan blooming in my mind, fully formed and beautiful in its absurdity. Fine. I'll make it so accessible it'll be parked in my driveway. I'll make it so visible it'll haunt your dreams. That night, I didn't debug a single line of code. I didn't capture a single control point. I fell down a much more interesting rabbit hole, the wild world of government surplus auctions and used emergency vehicle listings. My mission was clear. I was going to buy an ambulance. My search history became a thing of beauty. Used ambulance for sale. Decommissioned emergency vehicle regulations. Can a civilian own a vehicle with emergency lights? The internet, as it always does, provided. I waded through listings for rusted-out vans that looked like they'd been used as sets for horror movies, and overpriced party buses that were just ambulances with a cheap stereo and some LED strips thrown in, and then I saw her. A 1998 Ford E350. She was a big, blocky beast, decommissioned from some tiny rural county in the next state over. She had high mileage, but the listing claimed meticulously maintained by volunteer staff. The picture showed a clean interior, lots of storage compartments, and a distinct lack of bloodstains, which I took as a positive sign. The best part? The price was shockingly reasonable, well within the budget I mentally allocated for Project Petty Revenge. The seller's name was Dale. I called the number. A gruff, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Yellow?" "Hi, is this Dale? I'm calling about the Ford E350 ambulance you have listed online." "Yep, she's still here, solid machine. Siren and lights are disabled per state law, but the wiring's all there, tucked away nice and neat. Why's a fellow with a voice like yours want an old bus like this?" He sounded like he'd been smoking unfiltered cigarettes since the Truman administration. I took a breath. This was the moment of truth. It's a bit of a long story, but the short version is that my homeowners association president hid the community defibrillator in a locked basement because she felt it clashed with the flower beds. There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. I thought he might have hung up. Then, a low chuckle rumbled through the phone, quickly escalating into a full-blown, wheezing cackle. It was the sound of a man who had seen the full spectrum of human stupidity and was delighted to discover a new shade. "Son," he finally managed to say, catching his breath. "Son, you get yourself down here. I'll knock $100 off the price. Hell, I'll throw in a spare backboard and a box of expired saline IV bags for free. You're doing the Lord's work." A week later, a very large, very white, very conspicuous ambulance was delivered on a flatbed truck and deposited squarely in my driveway. It was bigger than I'd pictured. It was more present. It blocked out the sun on my living room window. It was glorious. The arrival of the great white whale, as I'd come to call it, had the same effect on the tranquil suburban harmony of Willow Creek Estates as a pterodactyl landing in a birdbath. Curtains twitched. Dog walkers stopped mid-stroll. A group of kids on bikes skidded to a halt and just stared, their mouths agape. And then, as I knew she would, Brenda appeared. She didn't walk. She materialized, as if summoned by the sheer disruptive force of the vehicle's presence. She had her clipboard. Of course she had her clipboard. She marched up my driveway, her sensible walking shoes making angry, crunching sounds on the pavement. She stopped a few feet from the ambulance's grill, regarding it with the same horror she might reserve for a pile of burning tires. "Alexander," she said, her voice tight and strained. "What is that?" "Brenda, good morning," I said cheerfully, wiping a bit of road dust off the hood with my sleeve. "This is my new project. It's a 1998 Ford E350, a classic. Falls well within the vehicle age restrictions outlined in CC and R Section 9, Paragraph 4, which states vehicles must be no more than 25 years old." I had done my homework, all of it. Her eyes narrowed. "It's a commercial vehicle. That is a clear violation of Section 11. "Is it?" I feigned surprise. "Because I have the title right here." I pulled the folded document from my back pocket. "Registered to one Alexander Price, private citizen. It's a multi-purpose vehicle. No commercial markings, no company name, no advertisements, just a privately owned vehicle parked in a private driveway. Perfectly legal." The look on her face was a delicious cocktail of fury and frustration. She knew I was right. She made a furious scribble on her clipboard, the pen digging into the paper. "We'll see about this," she muttered, before turning on her heel and marching away. The first official salvo in the paper war arrived in my mailbox that evening. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo embossed on the flap. Inside was a formal violation notice. Violation CC and R Section 11.2. Parking of prohibited vehicles. Details: parking of an unapproved vehicle type, ambulance commercial van in driveway. Action required. Remove vehicle from property within 72 hours. I smiled. I spent the next hour drafting my reply. It was a masterpiece of pedantic, passive-aggressive legalese. I quoted the CC and Rs back at her, defining commercial vehicle, according to their own bylaws, as one that is used for business purposes or displays commercial lettering. I pointed out that my vehicle did neither. I attached a copy of my private registration. I printed it on high-quality paper, signed it, and mailed it back to the HOA office via certified mail with a return receipt requested. This was war, and the first rule of war is to create a paper trail. With the legal front handled for now, it was time to begin the fun part: the transformation. A plain white ambulance was a statement. A fully outfitted, custom-branded neighborhood auxiliary response vehicle was a masterpiece. This required specialists. My first call was to Gus, an electrician whose business card simply said, "Gus, I do wires." His online reviews were a mix of, "He's a genius," and "He's terrifying." He arrived in a beat-up pickup truck that looked like it had been in a demolition derby, took one look at the ambulance, and let out a low whistle. "All right," he said, walking a slow circle around it. "What's the story here? Midlife crisis? Prepping for the zombie apocalypse?" He was a big guy, with arms covered in faded tattoos of dragons and skulls. "HOA dispute," I said simply. A slow grin spread across his face, revealing a missing canine tooth. "Say no more." He understood immediately. It was a language that transcended words. "So, what do you need? You want me to hook up the flashies?" "I want everything working," I said. "The rooftop light bars, the grill lights, the side strobes, the works." "You know it's super illegal to use any of that on a public road, right? he asked, a twinkle in his eye. Of course, I replied, adopting my most serious tone. They will only be used for demonstration purposes on private property, and for ambiance. Gus slapped the side of the van, the sound echoing through the quiet street. Ambiance, I like it. My brother-in-law lives in one of these neighborhoods. They told him his kid's basketball hoop was aesthetically displeasing and made him take it down. I'll have this thing lit up like Vegas on New Year's Eve by lunchtime. You want the whale or the Yelp siren prioritized on the main switch? Let's go with the whale, I said. It feels more authoritative. While Gus was working his electrical magic, I moved on to phase 2, the branding. I found a young, impossibly hip graphic designer named Leo who ran a custom vinyl wrap shop out of a warehouse downtown. I emailed him my concept. I met him at his shop, a chaotic space that smelled of vinyl and creative energy. He had my design up on a massive monitor. Dude, he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, this is epic. It's so clean, so official, and yet so not. I love it. The design was simple but elegant. A wide, dark blue stripe ran the length of the vehicle. Inside the stripe, in crisp, authoritative white lettering, were the words, Willow Creek Estates, Neighborhood Auxiliary Response. On the driver and passenger doors, in a slightly smaller, friendlier font, a Concerned Resident Initiative. It's the ultimate in malicious compliance, I said, admiring our work. My mom is the treasurer for her HOA, Leo said, his eyes gleaming. I've heard the stories. I feel this in my soul. Can we add something? Just a little touch? He grabbed his stylus and, on the screen, drew a simple heart logo with a clean, elegant lightning bolt passing through it, the universal symbol for an AED. He placed it right on the rear doors. Leo, I said, a tear of joy nearly forming in my eye. You're a genius. The third pillar of my project was the most important, the actual medical gear. This wasn't just for show. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I went on a glorious online shopping spree. I didn't just buy an AED, I bought the Philips HeartStart FR3, a top-of-the-line model used by first responders, complete with a digital screen that gives real-time CPR feedback. I bought a brand-new oxygen tank and a regulator. I ordered a full professional trauma bag, cervical collars, splints of every size, bandages, gauze, and every other piece of first aid equipment I could think of. My crowning purchase, however, was a full-body CPR training mannequin. The website had options for male, female, and child models. I chose the adult female. When the checkout form asked for a name for the shipping label, I paused for a moment, then typed in Brenda. It felt right. As the van was being transformed, the paper war with the HOA escalated. A week after I sent my first response, Violation Notice #2 arrived. Violation CC and R, Section 8.1. Unapproved exterior modifications to property. Details. The vehicle, being parked on the property, is subject to Architectural Committee review for any exterior changes. The addition of lettering and striping has not been approved. My response was even more meticulously crafted this time. I argued that a motor vehicle, being personal property and not real property, was not subject to the same architectural review as a house, fence, or shed. I included citations from state vehicle codes distinguishing between the two. I also gently reminded them that their own bylaws allowed for one privately owned, non-commercial vehicle to be parked in the driveway. It did not specify the color or pattern of said vehicle, again certified male. A few days later, Notice #3. This one felt a bit more desperate. Violation, CC and R Section 11.5, operating a business from a residence. Details. The nature of the vehicle suggests the operation of an unlicensed medical transport or emergency response business. This one was my favorite. I went to a notary and had a formal affidavit drawn up. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that I was not and would not be operating any form of business, that I would never charge for any assistance rendered, that I was receiving no payment, and that the entire project was a personal hobby, no different from competitive gardening or the restoration of a classic automobile. I attached the notarized affidavit to my response letter. I also started CCing my cousin, who was a lawyer, on all email correspondence just to add a little professional letterhead to the mix. The final official notice was the nuisance complaint. This one alleged my vehicle was an eyesore and was disrupting the tranquil character of the neighborhood. This time, I didn't just rely on bylaws. I went on the offensive. I drafted a short letter explaining the purpose of my Neighborhood Auxiliary Response Project, framing it as a direct response to the inaccessibility of the community AED during the Mr. Henderson incident. I walked it around to my immediate neighbors. Sarah, the young mom, signed it without hesitation. "Are you kidding? I sleep better at night knowing that thing is parked down the street. Brenda is out of control." Dave, who had run with me to the pool, signed it and shook my hand. My best signature came from Mr. Henderson himself. He read my letter, his eyes welling up. "Son, what you're doing, it's a wonderful thing." He signed his name with a flourish, and then wrote a separate, glowing letter of his own, calling me a true community hero, and my van a chariot of preparedness. I scanned the signed petition and Mr. Henderson's letter and attached them as Exhibit A and Exhibit B to my official response. I sent it off, feeling the tide of the war beginning to turn in my favor. Brenda had the rules, but I had the people, and a very large, very official-looking van. The day finally came, the annual HOA summer block party. This was Brenda's Super Bowl, her Oscars, her State of the Union address. It was the one day a year she could survey her kingdom and see it functioning exactly as she envisioned. Perfect lines, coordinated colors, and joyful but not too loud residents. The party was held in the community green space by the pool. Brenda was in her element, directing volunteers with the precision of a drill sergeant. The tablecloths were a checkered blue and white. The balloons were a matching blue and white. The theme was summertime serenity. My van, now complete, was anything but serene. It was magnificent. The dark blue stripe gleamed against the pristine white paint. The lettering was sharp and authoritative. Leo's heart and lightning bolt logo on the back doors was a touch of pure genius. Gus had done his job perfectly. The light bars were clean and polished, ready for action. I had spent the morning washing and waxing it until it shone. I waited until the party was in full swing, until the smell of grilled hot dogs was thick in the air, and the sound of children's laughter filled the park. Then, I made my move. I got in, turned the key, and the old diesel engine rumbled to life with a comforting growl. I backed it slowly out of my driveway. Heads turned instantly, conversations faltered. A hush fell over the street. I drove at a stately 5 miles per hour, the van gliding down the road like a parade float. I didn't turn on the lights or the siren. I didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough. I pulled into the designated overflow parking area, which was, by a stroke of beautiful luck, directly adjacent to the main party pavilion. I parked, turned off the engine, and got out. Phase 2 of my plan went into action. I opened the side doors of the van, revealing the clean, organized interior with its neatly stowed equipment. I pulled out a folding table and set it up. On it, I placed my brand new top-of-the-line AED. Next to it, I laid out Brenda, my CPR dummy, her plastic face staring blankly up at the sky. Finally, I propped up a friendly, hand-lettered sign, Free community AED and CPR demo. All welcome. Get familiar, save a life. It was like ringing a dinner bell. Mr. Henderson was my first visitor. He walked over, leaning on his cane, a huge grin on his face. "Alex, my boy, this is marvelous, absolutely marvelous." He drew a crowd. Sarah came over, bringing her 2 young kids. "Can you show them what to do?" she asked. "I want them to know, just in case." "Absolutely," I said, my voice full of a confidence I didn't know I had. Soon, a dozen, then 2 dozen people were gathered around my table. I was in my element. I wasn't a systems analyst anymore. I was a teacher, a helper. I showed them how to turn on the AED, how to place the pads on the dummy's chest. "Now, the machine will analyze the heart rhythm," I explained, my voice carrying over the crowd. "It will not shock someone who doesn't need it. It's safe and designed for anyone to use." I demonstrated proper CPR compressions on Brenda's chest. Click, clack, click, clack. You want to push hard and fast, about 2 inches deep, to the beat of Stayin' Alive. It's easy to remember. People were engaged, they were asking smart questions, they were learning. We were becoming a community that was actually prepared, not one that just had rules about it. And we were doing it right in the middle of Brenda's perfectly curated party. I was completely and utterly stealing her thunder. And then I saw her. She was marching across the grass, her face a thundercloud. The summertime serenity of her event had been shattered, and she was coming to confront the storm. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice was a shrill shriek that cut through the pleasant murmur of my demonstration. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. "Hello, Brenda," I said calmly, not missing a beat. "Welcome. Would you like to learn how to save a life? I'm just providing a free educational service to my neighbors." "This is an HOA-sponsored event," she spat, her eyes wild. "You do not have authorization for this sideshow." A man from the back of the crowd, one I didn't know, spoke up. "Leave him alone, Brenda. This is more useful than the best petunia contest you have scheduled for 3 o'clock. A ripple of agreement went through the crowd. This was no longer just my fight. Brenda's face went from red to a deep, alarming purple. "This is a violation," she sputtered, searching for a foothold. "You're creating a disturbance. You have unauthorized emergency lights on that vehicle. You're impersonating a paramedic. I'm calling the police." And she did it. To my utter astonishment, she whipped out her phone, her fingers jabbing at the screen, and put it to her ear. "Yes, I'd like to report an emergency," she said, her voice filled with a theatrical tremor. "There's a man here at the Willow Creek Estates Park. He's driving a fake ambulance and pretending to be a paramedic. He's frightening the residents." The crowd went dead silent. Everyone just stared. First at Brenda on her phone, then at me. I just stood there, one hand resting on the CPR dummy's shoulder, and waited. The trap had been set. Now it was time to see it sprung. That brings us back to Officer Miller and his world-weary sigh. He stood there, listening to my calm explanation, then to Brenda's frantic, high-pitched accusations. His partner, a younger officer named Chen, did a slow, professional walk-around of the van. He peered in the windows, noted the professional but not official lettering, and gave the tires a little kick. "Ma'am, please let me handle this," Officer Miller said to Brenda, his voice polite but firm. He turned back to me. "So, this vehicle, it's registered and insured?" "Yes, sir, right here." I had prepared for this exact moment. I pulled a neat plastic folder from the van's glove compartment and handed it to him. It contained the registration, the insurance card, a copy of the bill of sale, and for good measure, copies of all my correspondence with the HOA. He took it and flipped through the documents. He raised an eyebrow. "You've been busy." "I believe in being thorough," I said. "And you're not a paramedic or an EMT?" he asked. No, sir. I'm a systems analyst who believes in community preparedness. I am a private citizen, providing free, informational, non-certified demonstrations on my own time because our official community defibrillator is unavailable. Officer Chen rejoined his partner. Everything looks legit, he said quietly. It's just a van. A very weird van, but just a van. Officer Miller nodded, a finality settling on his features. He had all the pieces of the puzzle, and the picture it made was painfully clear. He turned to face Brenda, who was vibrating with anticipation, clearly expecting him to slap a pair of cuffs on me. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of the law. "This gentleman is on private property which he has permission to be on. His vehicle is legally registered and insured to him. He is not breaking any laws." Brenda's jaw dropped. But the lights, the impersonation. "The lights are not active, so no law is being broken," Miller continued, his tone hardening slightly. "And he is not impersonating anyone. He's not claiming to be an officer or a paramedic. He's showing people how to use a first aid device. What he's doing, as far as I can tell, is a public service." He let that hang in the air for a moment. Then came the coup de grace. He took a step closer to her, his expression turning stern. "However," he said, his voice low and serious, "we did receive a 911 call for what is clearly a non-emergency. This is a neighborhood dispute. Calling 911 for something like this ties up emergency resources that could be needed for a real crisis, like a car accident, or a robbery, or someone having an actual heart attack. Please be more judicious with your use of emergency services in the future, ma'am." It was a kill shot, delivered with the calm precision of a surgeon. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten. He just laid out the facts, and in doing so, he dismantled every last shred of her authority in front of the entire neighborhood. She was no longer a powerful president. She was just a woman who had wasted the police's time. Brenda stood there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish, but no sound came out. Her face, which had been a furious red, was now a pale, chalky white. Defeated. Utterly and completely defeated. Officer Miller gave me a curt nod, a flicker of something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "Have a good evening, sir," he said. "You too, officer. Thanks for your time." They got back in their cruiser and pulled away, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The silence lasted for about 3 seconds, and then it was broken by a quiet snicker from the back of the crowd. Then another. Then a smattering of applause. Brenda wilted. Without another word, she turned and shuffled away, her clipboard hanging limply at her side. She retreated back to her home, her reign of terror over. I turned back to my table and my crowd of neighbors. I cleared my throat. "So," I said with a grin, "as I was saying, you want to push to the beat of Stayin' Alive. Who wants to try?" The aftermath of the great block party showdown was swift and decisive. Brenda's authority didn't just crack, it evaporated. The neighborhood's online message board, usually a sleepy place for discussing lost cats and recommending plumbers, lit up like a switchboard. The story of Brenda calling the cops on my CPR demo became an instant legend. People I'd never even spoken to posted messages of support. The next morning, I found a freshly baked apple pie on my front porch. The note, tucked under a fork, read, "Thank you for standing up for all of us. Sarah and family." Later that day, Mr. Henderson came over, not with tomatoes, but with a proposal. "Alex, my boy," he said, his eyes twinkling, "I've been thinking. Every great ship needs a captain and a first mate. You're the captain, obviously. I'd like to formally apply for the position of official-unofficial co-captain of the Neighborhood Auxiliary Response Vehicle." "Mr. Henderson," I said, shaking his hand warmly, "the position is yours, No application necessary. Within a week, an online petition was circulating to call for a special election for a new HOA board. It got more signatures in 24 hours than the original HOA charter probably had. Faced with a public uprising and total humiliation, Brenda didn't even wait for the vote. A terse 2-sentence email was sent out to the entire community. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position as president of the Willow Creek Estates HOA for personal reasons. I wish the community all the best. It was over, just like that. A month later, we had a new HOA board. The new president was a guy named Mark, a reasonable, level-headed software engineer who lived 2 streets over. I knew him vaguely from the bus stop. His first act as president was to call me personally. "Alex," he said, a hint of laughter in his voice, "we're having our first board meeting tonight. Agenda item number 1 is you." I attended the meeting, this time in person. It was held in the clubhouse, the same building that housed the infamous document storage closet. The atmosphere was completely different. People were relaxed, smiling. Mark stood up. "All right, first motion on the agenda. It's a 3-parter. First, the board would like to formally apologize to Alex Price for the previous board's ridiculous behavior." He looked at me and nodded. The other board members murmured their assent. "Second," he continued, "we are voting to approve the immediate purchase of a new top-of-the-line AED, which will be installed by a professional electrician in a heated, lighted, and highly visible box right outside this clubhouse door." The motion passed unanimously. "And third," he said, looking directly at me with a grin, "we'd like to form an official Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Subcommittee. Its first task will be to organize community-wide CPR and first aid training, and we would like to ask Alex to be its first chairman." He paused. "We can even offer a small annual stipend from the HOA budget to help with the upkeep of your van, which from this day forward we'd like to officially recognize as the Willow Creek Estates Auxiliary Response Vehicle." I was floored. I had started this whole thing out of spite, a glorious, oversized monument to my own pettiness. And somehow it had blossomed into a genuine, community-led movement for good. "I accept," I said. A slow smile spreading across my face. Which brings me to today. I'm sitting on my front porch, sipping my morning coffee. My van, my beautiful, absurd chariot, is parked proudly in the driveway. From this angle, I can see the passenger seat. My CPR dummy, Brenda, is sitting there, propped up against the door. Yesterday, for a laugh, I put a pair of my old sunglasses on her. She looks surprisingly cool. My phone buzzes. It's an email from Mark and the new HOA board. Subject: Agenda for First Preparedness Meeting. I open it. It's a list of ideas. Scheduling a certified instructor for a training day, creating a phone tree for emergencies, mapping out the locations of fire hydrants. It's real. It's happening. I look at the van, a vehicle born from a feud over a garden gnome and a hidden defibrillator. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the most ridiculously oversized solution is the only one that works. It's a 4,000-pound symbol of malicious compliance that accidentally created a better, safer community. I take a sip of my coffee and smile. Okay, I think to myself as I start to type a reply to the board. Maybe that escalated a little, but you know what? Totally worth it.